What's going on, everybody? Happy Tuesday. Welcome to another edition of Set Bet Spike, the first in quite some time here on Game Plus Network, also live on our FTN Network YouTube page. Chris Meaney and the Eric Young hanging out with you. And it is football season, of course. Hockey season is over. If anything drastic happens in the NHL during this show, I'm sure we're going to bring it up. We're going to address it, but this is a football show if you're just familiar with it. Last year, we debuted this show on Game Plus Network, and we're about 2 months away from the beginning of the NFL season. It is ramping up. This is indeed draft season. So I think, on this show in particular, I know for sure we're going to dive into the NFC East. We're going to take a look at the Philadelphia Eagles, who went to the Super Bowl last year, the New York Giants, who not only went to the playoffs, won a playoff game. The Dallas Cowboys also were in the playoffs and indeed did win a playoff game, and the Washington Commanders. So we are starting with the NFC East. We'll have about, roughly 10 shows, Eric, before the season does get underway. We'll preview all the divisions, all the teams, talk about them from a betting and a fantasy standpoint, catch you up on things that have happened, who's in, who's out, and also hopefully we'll do some underdog best ball drafts, some live fantasy football drafts on this show as well. But happy Tuesday, sir. It's here, man. Like, I feel like as soon as Independence Day and Canada Day pass, it's like it just feels like football season.
Yeah, I mean, look at we're going to say a bunch of things that are going to be wrong. Guys are going to get hurt. Things are going to change. Free agents are going to end up someplace. Dalvin Cook and Zeke Elliott and so on and so forth. You know that those guys are going to play football somewhere. Does it screw up, the rankings and stuff? Yes, it will. Will people getting hurt mess up, the rankings and things that we talk about? Yes. But this is a show for the psychos, just like Dangle Bet Selly. The Bet Set Spike is for the hardcore. And I mean, the truth is like you're in drafts, I'm in drafts. Like if you're a Scott Fishbowl player, you're in there. The scoring and the draft it's complete madness. So it doesn't prepare you for anything. And trying to be prepared for that draft is almost impossible for two reasons. One, the settings are wild. And two, we're so far out. Like we can rewatch this show right now, the first one of the season, and 80% of it is going to be wrong. I believe
No.
Yeah, 100%.
No.
Where are settings and where you're ranking players and what you believe. And I'll say this. Strength of schedule has been something that I have fought against for the last 10 years. If you go back and look at people like, oh, this team's going to be good and this defense is going to be good and they upgraded the offensive line and this, that, and the other, we do not know, especially line play. Getting a good lineman doesn't mean that line is going to be better. It has to work as a unit, and just because a player gets paid and just because he was good somewhere else doesn't mean he's going to be good in his new spot. And trying to guess what defenses are going to be good is almost impossible. And often the people that talk about this and saying that you got to look at strength of schedule and who they play and this, that, and the other, don't think about it. Don't worry about it. Draft good players that are going to be on offensively good teams. Past that, the defense and things like that doesn't matter.
Yeah, well, I will agree with you that it is things change, from week 5, you may think that a team is, have a really good defense, and maybe midway through the season, not so much, and vice versa. A team like Seattle last year had a 5.5 win total. Nobody was really expecting them to do much without Russell Wilson. Geno Smith comes to town. The defense actually plays pretty good, and Geno Smith led the NFL in completion percentage and had
just like everyone predicted.
Right. So things are going to change, but I got a pretty good feeling that we're going to be on par on this show. We have a pretty good idea of what players are going to excel on these teams that we're going to talk about. We'll talk about fantasy targets throughout. We'll bring up ADP. We'll talk about them from a fantasy and a betting perspective. But yeah, it's July 11th. Things will change. Camps aren't even open up yet. We're going to try to identify players that are going to rise up draft boards, once they start to get on the field and ball out. Like last year, we talked about Dameon Pierce. Remember we talked about Dameon Pierce on the show, and we said how he was a good pick in the 10th and 11th round for weeks. And then all of a sudden, the training camps opened up. They cut Marlon Mack in Houston, and Dameon Pierce went from a 10th and 11th round pick to a 4th round pick. We're going to try to identify players that are going to rise up draft boards once we see them on the field and things are happening in the NFL world. You mentioned Dalvin Cook. As of today, according to DraftKings, favored to go to Miami and New England. Those are two teams that are, potential, if you believe Vegas. And there have been some reports that Dalvin Cook turned down a contract to Miami. He was released by Minnesota earlier in the year. DeAndre Hopkins is still available, also favored to go to New England and Tennessee Titans. Still got Leonard Fournette out there, Ezekiel Elliott. There's still some Kareem Hunt, still some decent players out there, especially running backs. Like you said, will land on teams and will muddy the waters a little bit. If you think Tony Pollard is headed for a 350 touch season, well, if they bring back Zeke on the, just over a minimum contract, that will cut into Tony Pollard. Who knows? We'll get into it in a little bit, but I think maybe Zeke is good for Tony Pollard's game, but we'll get into it boys in just a touch. You had a keeper league, no, that wasn't a keeper league. That was a Scott Fish Bowl. I'm also in the Scott Fish Bowl. Shout out to Scott Fish. He's fantastic. I mean, this guy is the best guys, not only just in the industry, but in real life. I mean, been doing it's not even arguably, it's the biggest fantasy football draft out there. It's a mix of, industry people. I quote like this: industry, it really is industry people, maybe quote experts and casual players as well. EY, we lost your camera and you're back now. That's good. It is a mix of just a lot of people in the industry and big time fantasy football players. It got underway this week. I think there was some live drafts over the weekend, late last week as well. I am into the 4th round. I picked 6th overall, and you were just debating a couple running backs as well. You're in and you're out. We see you right now. Maybe there you go. You got your cameras.
I don't know what's going on, man.
I don't know what's going on with you either. You figure that out. Maybe try to mess around with some chords. We'll get into the question that you did have on some running backs. I see some people hanging out here, so I'll continue to roll with the show until we get EY back here. Okay, NBA rigged in the house. Good morning, Chris. Joyful Tuesday to you, sir. Good morning to you as well, Eric. How are you both doing? We're doing great. We appreciate you jumping in here. NBA rigged in the house. Dameon Pierce, who we just touched on, have a better same regress season compared to last year. Can any of you share your Scott Fish Bowl board? Would love to see how you guys drafted. We won't be able to do that today on the fly like that, but it's something that we'll be able to do on Thursday. We'll be here with you guys on Tuesdays and on Thursdays on Set Bet Spike. So maybe Thursday, once the draft gets a little bit deeper, we can get into it. Do you want to share how, your first couple of rounds went? You started Jalen Hurts. You were in the 2 spot.
Yeah. So I went Jalen Hurts in the 2. McCaffrey went first. The reality is it's a 2 quarterback league, so quarterbacks are on a premium. Like we're in, I want to say we're in the 4th round.
Well, we lost EY there again, so we'll just remove him and we'll get him back here once he gets going. I see that he's ready to rock. I'll share my my Scott Fish Bowl here with you guys. We'll get EY back here. I think he's going now. So this is how my start of my draft went. I know nobody else cares about our drafts really, but we'll show you guys the board and give you a little bit of a feel. But it is very different. You're getting points for rushing attempts, completions, 10 yards, first downs, things like that. So I started off in the 6th spot. I went with Joe Burrow. The draft went Jalen Hurts, Patrick Mahomes, Josh Allen, Travis Kelce. Tight ends at premium. You're getting extra points for tight ends, so they're going to go early and often. Lamar Jackson, and then I took Joe Burrow in the 6th spot, and then Justin Fields, Christian McCaffrey, Justin Herbert, Justin Jefferson here in the 10th spot. Austin Eckler and Jamar Chase to round out the first round. And then when it came back to me, I ended up getting Nick Chubb, who I like quite a bit. I think could be headed for a 2,000 total yard season. I said that on Mean Streets the other day, and I wasn't joking about that. And then in the 3rd round, a slight reach by me, I took T. Higgins. I wanted to pair him up with Joe Burrow. I'm trying to maximize my upside. It's kind of like best ball. You want to have some stacks. I think it's very important. When Joe Burrow tosses 3 or 4 touchdowns, I got T. Higgins in there. Maybe I'll get Boyd a little bit later on. Irv Smith, I'll have a little bit of a Cincy stack. And Anthony Richardson just went here in the 4th, and I am in the hole. So I'm coming up here in a couple picks, and I'll probably hammer home another quarterback, maybe my guy Geno Smith. But how did the start of your draft go at Scott Fishbowl?
Yeah, so I was picked 2, and like I was trying to say earlier, I don't know what's going on. My internet says it's good, everything's fine. Technology can be a cruel mistress, so bear with me, guys. I went Jalen Hurts in the 2 spot. Like I said, this is quarterback premium, and you're going to have to. You need 2 at least, right? So I mean, I'm going to probably try to end up with 3, if not 4. And I started with Jalen Hurts. I believe he will improve. Having AJ Brown, as an outside alpha receiver is a massive deal for him. Devontae Smith, Skeletor, as I call him, the dude is a super talented wide receiver. He's just so little. It's terrifying watching him cut and run routes across the middle of the field.
He's a stud.
Dallas Goedert has been great since they moved on from Ertz, and they've got Swift, they've got Penny, they've got Scott, they've got Gainwell. It's going to be the same maddening process for running backs like it's been in almost every Doug Peterson offense. So it's just going to be difficult, right, to point out which one's going to be the best value. So I went Hurts on the way back. I went AJ Brown, and then at the start of the 3rd, the draft flips. So yeah, there's a long wait in between. And then I went Breece Hall. And the reason I did that is I believe that he's going to be fine. He's young enough where he'll bounce back from that surgery. I think there's a very good chance in my heart and in my soul. I feel he's going to be ready for game 1. I think the New York Jets are going to be massively improved, and having a very good to great, possibly, quarterback in Aaron Rodgers is going to change how that offense works. Like, there was no fear of deep passes last year with the quarterbacks they had playing there. Like Zach Wilson, there was times where he looked great and athletic, and there's other times it looked like it was first time playing football. So having at least Rodgers being steady will change, and I love Breece Hall as a player. So that's where I'm at. That's as far as we're at. And I asked you the question of Kenneth Walker. Who was I can't remember.
I think it was Kenneth Walker, Joe Mixon, and Aaron Jones.
That's it.
Yeah.
Kenneth Walker, Joe Mixon, Aaron Jones. And that's going to be, I'm going to go running back, I believe, unless all 3 of those go, which is a possibility. The draft is insane, right? I said, like, trying to prepare for the Scott Fishbowl is almost impossible. There's so many players, so lots of guys are going contrarian, right? They're just all over the board with who they draft and what they draft. It's so early, so the reality is we're all guessing. We all have hypothesis, I guess, is a better way to say it. We're not guessing. Like I'm a lunatic when it comes to this stuff. It's on par with how I follow hockey. But the truth is like you said, training camp hasn't even started. We don't know what rookies are going to do. We don't know what the depth charts are going to look like. We don't know who's going to get hurt. We don't know any of that stuff. But watching shows like this, having an FTN package with, the new draft almanac that came out, it's a way to prepare. And every single second of every single day, the spare minute I have, I'm preparing.
I love it. And we're going to help you on this show as well. We want to get into it because we're already behind the 8 ball. We got 4 teams to preview, and we're already running out of time. So we'll get into it here. NBA Rigged has a question about T. Higgins and Devontae Smith. I mean, we're splitting hairs with those 2 guys. I mean, they're in the same tier for me. They're 1A, 1B on their respective squads. AJ Brown is the number 1 in Philadelphia. T. Higgins is the number 2 in Cincinnati behind Jamar Chase. Those guys are in the same tier for me. I got him wide receiver 12 and 13. They're both studs, right? What can you say about either of those guys? And I think you should go by tiers and not rankings. And those guys are in the tier for me with Chris Olave. And I would put Garrett Wilson in that tier as well. I'm seeing him going a little bit too high in drafts. I had an Amon-Ra St. Brown. I think he's in for what will be a really good season. You mentioned the upgrade at the quarterback position with Aaron Rodgers. But yeah, both of these guys, I think NBA Rigged. I mean, It's really tough to break down either or. Devontae Smith been in the league for 2 years, over 2,100 yards, an uptick last year, and a lot of production, some one-on-one coverage, bringing in A.J. Brown, and T. Higgins needs a lot of one-on-one as well, with a lot of attention going to Jamar Chase. I don't think you can go wrong with either one of those picks. Smith is probably the guy that's going to fall down the board a little bit. Both guys kind of getting disrespected. Could finish as wide receiver ones. I know Devontae Smith did last year as well. Scott Fishbowl, we have rankings and strategy pieces for free over at ftmfantasy.com. It is a super flex league. You start 2 quarterbacks, premium scoring for tight ends, 1 extra point per reception, and for first down. No negatives this year for interceptions or fumbles. Last year, -4 for an interception. It's a full point PPR league, full point for first down instead of half a point. Even more premium tight end. They get 1 extra PPR point for a first down, up from 0.5 last year, 0.25 for a rushing attempt, 0.1 points for pass completion, 0.1 points for a first down. Kicker premium as well, 3.3 points for an extra point, up from 1 last year. So that's it for the Scott Fishbowl. We're going to get into the NFC East right now. According to DraftKings, for the odds to win the division, it is the Philadelphia Eagles that are favored here to win the NFC East. They won the NFC East last year. What I will say is there hasn't been a repeat winner inside this division since 2005, 2004, and it was the Philadelphia Eagles. So if you're following trends, I suppose you're picking the Cowboys or the Giants to win the division here, but I wanted to give you guys some live odds. It is the Eagles at -125 according to DraftKings. Dallas at +190 and the Giants at +850, and the Commanders are 12-1. So as I mentioned, there are 3 teams here in the NFC East that made the playoffs last year. The Eagles, we touched on this show almost all year. You thought that they would go undefeated, and they almost did. They lost 1 game in the regular season with Jalen Hurts. Jalen Hurts went 15-2 last year. The second loss he had was in the Super Bowl, and he was electric in the Super Bowl. So it certainly wasn't on him. As you see here, these are odds from the prop shop free tool over at ftmbets.com. Just giving you guys the best possible odds. I'm still seeing +100 for the Eagles to win the NFC East. They're +330 to win the NFC, the conference. They're 8-1 to win the Super Bowl, and their win total is 11.5. We're not going to roll through the schedule. We did that on Mean Streets. I had a guest jump on, Jovan Alford jumped on, and we rolled through the schedule, and we're doing some team previews on Mean Streets, and that's what we're doing. We're actually rolling through the schedule. And I know EY said a lot of things can change, but we have a pretty good idea. At least I feel like I have a pretty good idea of what teams are going to be competitive and what teams are not. And we had a slight lean to the Eagles over 11.5, but they do have the toughest schedule this season, according to their opponents and their winning percentage from last year. So you take that with a grain of salt, of course, because things are changed. They've changed. The team that they played last year, the Buccaneers, are not as good this year. You know what I mean? Like, there are teams that change in the offseason, but they do have a much tougher schedule. There was a lot of talk last year and how the Eagles just rolled through their opponents, and they did. They actually didn't face a lot of adversity at all, Eric. Into week 14, Hurts went down, and they faced a little bit of adversity with Gardner Minshew under center. But this was a team that cruised all year. They had leads into the second half. They leaned on the run game into the fourth quarter. They didn't face a lot of adversity. Now, this year, they got the Niners on the schedule. They got the Chiefs on the schedule. They got the Bills. They got a bit of a tougher schedule. Easy to start, but tougher towards the end of the year. Here's where their players are going over at underdogfantasy.com. Another free tool we have at FTM Fantasy to take a look at the ADP. Jalen Hurts, quarterback 2 on average off the board, 25th overall. DeAndre Swift and Rashaad Penny are 2 new running backs that they brought in this season. Swift is a Philly boy. He's going as RB23, 79th overall. Rashaad Penny from Seattle, RB38, 115.6 overall. And then you have Kenneth Gainwell there as well, RB53, 170th overall. A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith, and Dallas Goedert there stay true. Devontae Smith as wide receiver 13, 20th overall. A.J. Brown as wide receiver 6, 8.9 overall on average. And then Dallas Goedert as tight end 6, 74.9 overall. There's no room here for a third wide receiver from a fantasy football standpoint. Quez Watkins didn't show a whole lot, but there's some changes on this team. Maybe not that you see on the board from an offensive standpoint. You see the 2 backs in Swift and Penny. They also brought in Marcus Mariota. as a backup quarterback. Gardner Minshew is gone. Zach Pascal is gone. Miles Sanders is no longer around. Javon Hargrave, who had double-digit sacks, is no longer around. They lost Andre Dillard, TJ Edwards, Chauncey Gardner Johnson, Marcus Epps. They lost some guys on this team, but they did still bring back Jason Kelce, who's a future first ballot Hall of Famer center. They got Lane Johnson still, arguably the best offensive line in football. They still have arguably the best cornerback duo in football, bringing back James Bradbury and Darius Slay. So there's a lot of nice pieces on this Eagles team. You got Hurts. Let's just talk about the backfield. What do you make of this backfield without Miles Sanders? Or is there one that you like more than the other? And Swift versus Penny, are you staying away from it? How do you feel about the Philly backfield? Because we know Hurts is a stud, Smith is a stud, Brown's a GOAT. These guys are all great offensively. But the biggest question, I think, is what do you do at the running back position?
I like Penny over Swift. I mean, they acquired him first. Swift was, he's a letdown from the get-go. And I mean, some people I think will say that's the Detroit Lions and the misuse of him and not using him enough. I was like, well, what team in the NFL knows DeAndre Swift better than the Detroit Lions? The truth is almost probably last year at this time, Jamal Williams was a forgotten man and wasn't drafted and was probably picked up on waiver wires, and he scored like 55 touchdowns. So obviously he's always had a nose for the end zone, but the Detroit Lions were very good at running the ball in the red zone, and Jamal Williams was the guy to do that. So he's gone now, and in New Orleans, I think is valuable, and his value could skyrocket depending on what happens with Elva Kamara, and he's going to, something's going to happen. We just don't know what it is or when it's going to be. So I have Penny above Swift, and I have Swift quite a ways down because of where he's being drafted right now. I'm not going to have him on any of my teams because of how far down I have him. And I said it earlier, there's Penny, there's Swift, there's Scott, there's Gainwell. Right? All these players are still there, and it is a dart throw. I believe, barring health, and you can say that with every single player, so I'm going to try not to do it. They're healthy right now. Nobody's hurt right now, and I believe Rashaad Penny will be the 1 and 2 down back in this, and more importantly, will be the goal line back. He's the thumper. He's the guy with the power. He's the guy with the size. And I believe if Philadelphia was smart, they would limit Jalen Hurts running the ball near the goal line. It's how guys get hurt. I get that he's a power lifter and this, that, and the other, and he's very good at it. I don't think they'll go away from it completely, but I think if you have someone like Rashaad Penny, you pick him up in free agency, you pay him, and he's on the team. I believe he's going to be the guy that's going to have the majority of the goal line carries running back wise. I don't think any of them are of value because there's 4. And, we've been talking this way about New England running backs. It's a dart throw, and it always has been. And I think Philadelphia is turning into the exact same situation. Are they going to be a great offense? Undoubtedly. Are they going to be a prolific scoring team? Undoubtedly. But as far as where the touches and the production is going to come from the running back position, good luck. And they throw to the running backs the least amount out of any team last season. Last season, the least amount out of any team. So that's how you really get running back value nowadays, right? Is guys that catch the ball. And they barely threw to the running backs last year, and I don't think that changes.
No, I don't think it does either. I mean, Jalen Hurts hasn't shown us that he's like checking down. Why would you when, you can run for that first down instead? Jalen Hurts over the last 2 years, over 1,500 rushing yards, over 20 rushing touchdowns. He has averaged 10.1 rushing attempts and 51.5 rushing yards per game over the last 2 years. The 10.1 rushing attempts lead all quarterbacks. He had 20 goal line attempts last year, led all quarterbacks. He had 9 rushing touchdowns on those 20 goal line attempts. The quarterback sneak is like automatic. It's kind of a cheat code. I know other teams complain to the NFL about getting rid of it. Powerful dude. He squats like 600 pounds. Like it's an absolute automatic when they get in there. I agree with a lot of things that you said. I think the value is with Rashaad Penny. I think it's going to be a committee. I think it's smart. A lot of teams are spending money on running backs. Philadelphia spent $5 million on their running back room It's like 2% of their cap. Penny, Swift, these guys are on 1-year contracts. Gainwell's on a rookie deal. Boston Scott comes back on cheap on the veteran contract. I think Swift has the highest ceiling, but he's not going to be a guy that I believe is going to get the goal line work. Like you mentioned, Jamal Williams got the goal line work last year. You got Jalen Hurts taking some goal line carries, and Rashaad Penny has been one of the leaders in the NFL since he's entered in yards after contact. Unfortunately, he just has not been able to stay healthy. Neither guy has had a full season in the NFL to date. That's why it's a good 1-2 punch. It's good to have a committee. It's good to keep these guys fresh. I would project Penny to be the first and second down back as well. Probably 7 or so carries, get some goal line work in there, red zone touches. I would expect Swift to probably touch the ball 6 to 9 times as well. 3 catches potentially here and there, a couple carries. And then you do have guys like Gainwell and Boston Scott to keep guys fresh. All the other weapons I like. A.J. Brown touched career highs across the board. Moving from Tennessee to Philadelphia, you expect maybe not as much volume, but he improved in terms of targets and catches and receiving yards, and he matches career high in terms of touchdowns, and he set a Philadelphia record in receiving yards. And then Devontae Smith is the guy that went wide receiver 30-ish roughly last year and finished as a top 10 wide receiver inside the top 10 in receiving yards. And Dallas Goedert is a nice piece as well. I mean, nobody's really given Goddard attention when you're defending this team. NBA rigged in here, and we'll move on from the Eagles. They had ranked number 2 in offense, 29 points per game, a bit of a tougher schedule. How much regression would you see in their offense this season? 26.9 points per game, over or under that betting line. That's a high number, to be honest with you. If I had a lean, it probably would be over. The thing that I saw from Philadelphia as we wrap up here is that, like I mentioned, these guys cruised last year. They just dominated basically everybody. Their first loss was week 11 at home to Washington. And I think the fact that they are playing teams that are a little bit more competitive means that maybe they'll be able to push a little bit more. Maybe they're not just running the clock out in the third and the fourth quarter. Honestly, these guys had double-digit leads almost like 8 of their first 10 games. Like, this was a team that just they weren't pressed to throw the football. Jalen Hurts, people say he can't throw the ball. I mean, he led all quarterbacks last year in deep passing touchdowns with 11. That's from our tools over at FTN Fantasy. Deep passing touchdowns are touchdowns over 20 yards down the field. He also had the highest average depth of target on deep passing attempts at 31.34 roughly. So he can throw the ball down the field. And when you're defending these 2 wide receivers and Goddard in the middle of the field, and you have to, garner your attention on Jalen Hurts, all of a sudden you are leaving some one-on-one deep down the field. And A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith, arguably the best wide receiver duo in the league. So I would lean to the over on that, but it's not one of my favorite bets, I'll tell you that. I do like the Eagles to win the division. I think that they do have one of the most complete rosters in all of football. Let's move over to the Cowboys, who did threaten at times last year to win the division. Of course, they did lose Dak early on in the season. That put them a little bit behind the 8 ball, but this team did win a playoff game finally, right? It's been some time since they've won a playoff game. Their win total is at 9.5. It's juiced to the over. I do see some 10.5s at plus money. They're plus 190 to win the division, plus 650 to win the conference, and 16-1 to win the Super Bowl. I actually don't think that these are bad odds to win the Super Bowl. The boys at 16-1, the Eagles here at 8-1. The NFC is completely top heavy. It's the Eagles, the Giants, for me, it's the Eagles, the Niners, and the Cowboys. After that, are the Lions there yet? Or do you believe in what the Giants did last year? I think the Seahawks will take a bit of a rise. The path is much easier inside the NFC to get to the Super Bowl than it is in the AFC. I could name 10 teams in the AFC that I think will make the playoffs. I can really only name 4 or 5 in confidence in the NFC East. It would be Philly, it would be Dallas, it would be San Fran, it would be Seattle, and then I just don't know. I would say the Saints are in, but after that, it's pretty much wide open. So at 16-1 for the boys to win the bowl, it's not awful. And here are their weapons. Dak at quarterback 12, Tony Pollard as RB7, Malik Davis on the squad, RB69. They also have Ronald Jones. They drafted Deuce Vaughn, son of Mr. Vaughn, who is the scouting director in Dallas, drafted his son there. And you know what? Deuce Vaughn is a heck of a player. Like, he set records last year in college football for total yards. He's a bit tiny and he's more of a pass catching running back, but he could be a weapon for the Cowboys this season. CeeDee Lamb, they brought in Brandon Cooks. Michael Gallup is on the squad, and Jake Ferguson. They also drafted a tight end. So away from the squad, Dalton Schultz, Ezekiel Elliott. Those are the two big moves. How do you think this offense, also Kellen Moore, who's been the offensive coordinator for a couple of years, Schottenheimer is now in town. McCarthy's going to call the plays. Kellen Moore is in Los Angeles, and I think he's going to do wonders with Justin Herbert in that offense. But this is different, right? An offense without Ezekiel Elliott, and Tony Pollard is getting drafted as a top back. As you see here, he's coming off a broken fibula. All signs point to him being ready. EY, he has been the better back in Dallas over the past couple of years, but I do have some concerns on whether he can be a 20-touch guy on a week-to-week basis. He's not the biggest running back. He's been great, explosive through the air, hasn't been a great goal line back. Zeke did a good job of being a goal line back and protecting Dak. Do you have any worries for Tony Pollard? Are you comfortable drafting him, as a top 20 pick, as a top 10 back?
I think top 20. Yeah, I think so. And like I said, like if another back, I mean, it's not out of the possibility that there's no interest for Zeke elsewhere, and because they're familiar, they bring him back to run the ball on first down, maybe second down, and run goal line. He doesn't have the explosion and top end speed that he has to, but he's still very good at running between the tackles. And the truth is you, I, or anybody else has no idea if Tony Pollard can A, do it, and B, hold up to it. He's not built like a prototypical, 3-down back. They're going to add somebody. That's almost a guarantee. They're going to add somebody, and I believe it will be somebody that has a little bit of size and is good at running in between the tackles. Those guys are easier to bring back find.
Zeke. I wouldn't be shocked if they brought back Zeke, man.
Yeah, that's what I was trying to say. Would it be insane for him to come back at a discount, right? Like they had to shed that money in that contract. He just wasn't producing to pay a player those kind of numbers, but he obviously is familiar. I mean, the big thing you said is the offense is going to be different. It's a different coordinator. McCarthy's going to call the plays. It's going to be completely different. And trying to sit here and pretend like we know how the catches and the runs are going to be divvied up at this point is madness. Here's what we know is we know that Tony Pollard is an explosive, athletic, great, all-round, versatile running back. Not the fastest, not the most powerful, not the best pass catcher, not the best route runner, but he's very, very good at all those things and has very good top end speed. So if he remains the number one and they just stick with what they have, he could be a massive steal of where he's going right now. But are you brave enough to take him there right now out of the fact that you have no idea what this team is going to look like?
And I'm not brave enough. I'm not brave enough. This is from the game plan from Jeff Ratcliffe.
It's too much of a risk where he's going, right? Like it's the amount of draft capital you have to give up to get Tony Pollard. There's too many questions in my mind.
Yeah, there is. And, I'm an alpha, wide receiver type of guy. I like to get if it's not a wide receiver in the first round, I like to get like the strategy hero RB. I want one bell cow running back, and then I'm going to load up on wide receivers, and I probably won't attack the position again until round 5, 6, and 7. I think there's some pretty good value running backs. But yeah, Tony Pollard ahead of Derrick Henry, ahead of Josh Jacobs, who led the NFL in rushing yards last season, ahead of Ramondre Stevenson, who was 4th in the NFL in catches, and the backfield is completely his. I understand the backfield is his right now. We'll see what happens in Dallas over the next few weeks if they do bring in a veteran back. But this is from the game plan via Jeff Ratcliffe. Pollard, one of 6 running backs last season with 3 runs of 40-plus yards. He scored on 2 of them. He also notched 17 runs of 15-plus yards, which was tied with Kenneth Walker for the 3rd most. Talked about you just mentioned how explosive he is. He ranked 2nd among running backs in yards after contact per attempt last season at 3.82. And just the one major knock is something that I addressed. He had 7 goal line carries last year, 12 fewer than Zeke, and he just converted on 2 of those goal line carries. That's it. Those are carries inside the 5 for goal line carries. So not the biggest back. That's why I have some questions coming off the injury. But it doesn't seem like at this moment that Dallas has those questions because they haven't brought any veteran backs in. They didn't really address the position at the draft. So we'll see. If they go into week 1 without a veteran presence, then this really may be, hey, let's see what you got, Tony Pollard. It's your opportunity now to get 20-plus touches. But it doesn't always work that way. For years, I wanted Chase Edmonds to just be the guy. I wanted Kenyon Drake to go away. And then when Drake went away, Chase Edmonds had that opportunity, and he wasn't really efficient with those touches. Sometimes a running back just needs to be, a change of pace guy. It's a committee, spell off of each other. So I think, Zeke, as much as he wasn't efficient and he lost, a lot of speed over the past couple of years, he may have done wonders for Tony Pollard's game. So we'll see what it does look like, the backfield that is moving forward. Dak, I'm not into. I'd rather just wait a little bit more and get Geno Smith, as top 10 quarterback last year, nice rushing floor, good weapons around him. And I have no problem with CeeDee Lamb. I think between him and A.J. Brown, they're in a tier for me. I'd say CeeDee probably gets more targets. And Brennan Cooks here as wide receiver 43 is not a bad little option too. He's maybe one of the most underrated wide receivers in all of fantasy football over the past years as a guy, just, you're going to get about 1,000 yards from him. Let's move over to the Giants. Let's talk about the New York Football Giants. Win total at 7.5. NFC East plus a 50. NFC to win the conference at 28-1. And they are, of course, long shots to win the Super Bowl at 66-1. This is a tough team to figure out from an offensive standpoint. Brian Daboll went in and did a heck of a job with Daniel Jones. I was shocked. I mean, I really like Daboll. He's done some great things in the NFL. But in the first couple of weeks, I was like, oh, no, this is all over for Daniel Jones. He's on the final year of his deal. He's got one foot out the door. Daboll is like screaming at him on the sidelines. But Daniel Jones cleaned it up. I mean, he didn't turn the ball over, which is something he did in the first few years pretty consistently in the NFL. He took care of the rock. He had over 700 rushing yards. He had his best season in terms of completion percentage. Saquon bounced back. A lot of people talked about him being injury prone. He had a full season. He didn't have any receiving yards or receiving touchdowns, and he didn't catch as many passes as he did in the past, but he had a really good season on the ground. But just, I thought what the Giants and Daboll did, getting to the playoffs, maybe winning some games that they were a little bit on the lucky side of things, a lot of one-score games. It's okay. You got to have some luck on your side. They won those football games. They went in and beat the Minnesota Vikings on the road in the first playoff game. They did get smacked by the Eagles in the second round there, but pretty impressive what Daboll got out of Jones, considering the lack of weapons in the offense. Sterling Shepard went down, Darius Slayton, Isaiah Hodgins, Richie James had nice moments. They brought in Paris Campbell. They drafted Jalen Wyatt. They got Rondell Robinson, who they drafted last year, who missed a majority of the season. And they brought in Darren Waller. So, EY, this is a much different offense here in New York, but it's tough to pinpoint which guy. As you see, Hodgins, wide receiver 76, Campbell, wide receiver 77, Hyatt, wide receiver 82, Robinson, wide receiver 83. Do you want any of those pieces? Which guy is the most appealing to you? Or is it like Jake Seeley says, just get the cake and not the icing, and the cake would be Daniel Jones here? Maybe you just want the quarterback and none of the weapons, but it's a cheap price to pay. Pick one of these guys. Who do you think has the best season? Hodgins, Campbell, Hyatt, or Robinson?
If you're asking me to pick out of that, I'm going to probably pick Rondell Robinson, because that's who is hyped. But I think everybody is sleeping on Sterling Shepard. He was at OTAs, and from some of the reports I read, he said he looked really good. When he played last year, he was a very, very good wide receiver. Look, the reality is the Giants do not throw the ball a ton. Do I think they'll throw it more this year? Do I think Daniel Jones takes a step forward? I think that's likely. And I think it has everything to do with the coaching. And I talk about this on the hockey podcast. I'm going to talk about it here as well, is confidence. Having a coach that believes in you, having teammates that believe in you, having a fan base that's not dumping on you every single time you touch the ball. Daniel Jones was a very good quarterback last year, mostly fantasy wise and betting wise and stuff like that, because of the rushing. But the rushing's not going to go away. I mean, looking at the guy, it doesn't look like he's going to win a foot race against anybody. But the reality is Daniel Jones could wheel. He's a really, really good athlete. And I think he improves his standing as a quarterback. I think Paris Campbell is interesting. He's one of those guys I just can't quit. Like you read all the stuff, you see who he was, you see where he was drafted. You see when he plays and when he's used, how good of a player he can be. But I mean, outside of Sterling Shepard, I believe it's a dart throw. And I mean, I think there's a world where Darren Waller is the number one tight end or number one target on this team.
I agree with you 100% on that. I do believe Darren Waller could be the number one here. I mean, he's a big body tight end. My one issue with him is, you're drafting him as tight end 7. He's over 30
Yeah.
now, and the past couple of years has been a few injuries for Darren Waller. But when Daboll does things, I listen. Acquiring a guy like Darren Waller, drafting Jalen Hyatt, drafting Robinson, and bringing in a guy like Paris Campbell. I think for me, the guy that I want out of this wide receiver room is Isaiah Hodgins. I mean, there was a little bit of a connection there last year. He only had 351 yards. Slayton led the team with 724 yards. Richie James is gone now to Kansas City. Daniel Jones only tossed 15 touchdowns. He did have a 67.2% completion rate, only 472 attempts. I do believe what you said is true. He'll probably throw the football a little bit more. They're going to have to throw the football a little bit more. They needed some weapons around Daniel Jones to compete with the Eagles, to compete with the Cowboys. So I think, Hyde is going to be very boom or bust. I think, he and Slayton are going to take turns, some deep routes. I think he's going to have some big weeks and some quiet weeks. I think Hodgins is going to stay on the field probably more than anybody. And Paris Campbell isn't a guy that I've really fully believed in. I think, he has shown moments. He's coming off one of his better seasons. He was fully healthy for the first time. I don't think he has a lot of touchdown upside. So it's really tough, man. I would rank them Hodgins, Robinson, Campbell, and Hyatt. In best ball, I'd be willing to take some shots on Hyatt. It's a cheap stack. You can get Daniel Jones here as quarterback 14. He's probably undervalued. He finished roughly around 10 or 12 because of the rushing upside he has and a little bit more passing upside this season. You can go Daniel Jones and Darren Waller and then pick one of these wide receivers, an underdog for a bit of a stack. But Robinson's, I feel like his lines will probably be like, 6 for 40 or 6 for 50. You get Hyatt maybe like 3 for 75, a little bit of a bigger boom there for him and maybe a safer floor for some of these other guys like Hodgins and Robinson in there. But we'll move on for the Giants. Do you think they're a playoff team again? Do you think that they can build off last season's success that they had? What did they rattle off? They were 9-7-1. And again, they won a playoff game.
Yeah, I believe that they believe that for sure. And I think a lot of times that's the difference. And I think if I'm sticking with what I said, I think they improve offensively, and I think that they could. I think that the record would probably be very similarly. I think that the Commanders will be a better team, but I think there is an opportunity for the Giants to go back to the playoffs this year.
Man, the schedule is really tough for them. I mean, they start Dallas, Arizona, San Fran, Seattle, Miami, Buffalo. I see maybe one win out of those games, and that would be against Arizona, potentially at home to Seattle. Then they play Washington. Maybe that's 2 wins. They play the Jets. That's probably a loss. They play the Raiders on the road. Maybe that's a win. They get one of those Washington games. That's 4. Maybe they get New England before the bye. That's 5. Out of the bye is Green Bay, winnable game. That's 6. They get the Eagles twice. And in their last 3 games, they got the Rams. So, no, I don't think that they're a 9-win team. I think, the 7.5 is probably a fair line. I think that they can flirt with 8 wins, but I would lean to the under 9.5. It's a really, really tough schedule for them. Let's wrap up with the Commanders. The Commanders, it's same sort of deal. Another season with a different quarterback. Sam Howell is a guy that they drafted last year. We got to look at him towards the end of the season. But I wrote the NFC East preview for our old buddy Joe Pisapia, the fantasy playbook. And I was looking at Washington, and I went back and I looked at all the quarterbacks they had since Kirk Cousins. You want to guess how many quarterbacks they've had in Washington since Kirk Cousins left them in 2017?
Go.
Give me a guess. How many quarterbacks has Washington had since Kirk Cousins left in 2013?
I'm going to say, off the top of my head, 5.
Oh, my goodness. 13. Howell is Washington's 13th different quarterback since Kirk Cousins left in 2017. A 5-year span. If Howell doesn't play the entire season, Jacoby Brissett gets in there, and then they've had 14 different quarterbacks since Kirk Cousins. They have just not been able to figure this position out at all.
Yeah.
I thought they would be aggressive getting Lamar Jackson. We'll see what, Sam Howell has to offer, but Washington has, they went through so many Heineke and Wentz, and oh my goodness, I can't even.
McCoy.
There's just McCoy, Campbell. There's just been so many guys they've just threw out there, they haven't been able to figure this out. So they are underdogs here. There's no question. 6.5 is the win total, 13-1 to win the division, 40-1 for the conference, 80-1 for the Super Bowl. Here are their weapons. Sam Howell is quarterback 27. Antonio Gibson's going slightly ahead of Brian Robinson Jr., 32 for Gibson, pick 100 on average. Brian Robinson Jr., pick 114 on average. McLaurin as wide receiver 24. Jahan Dotson as wide receiver 39. Curtis Samuel as wide receiver 75. And Logan Thomas as tight end 34. Interesting to see Gibson go ahead of Robinson Jr. Gibson was a wide receiver in college. They, when he came out of the draft, Washington tried to make him a running back. Ron Rivera took shots at him all year last year, said that he was more of a east to west runner and he wanted him to be a north and south runner. But listen, he's not a running back. Brian Robinson Jr. is built like a running back. This is going to be the goal line back in Washington. This is going to be the first and second down opportunity back in Washington. What I will say about Gibson is he is a really good pass catching receiver. You know what I mean? But he was a wide receiver, so he's more suited for a third down role. J.D. McKissick is no longer on the squad. He's been one of the, over the last 4 years, J.D. McKissick is inside the top 10 receiving receptions among running backs. He's been a good pass catching running back over the last few years. So Gibson's going to get a boost that way, but I don't know, man. I think I'd rather Brian Robinson Jr. as RB 34. I think he's a pretty decent value in the middle rounds. I know it's not a great offense, and when they get behind, it'll be more Gibson than Brian Robinson Jr., but man, he showed us some things last year. He got shot in the knee before the season started. He came back way earlier and was productive. I'm a big fan of Brian Robinson Jr. He's one of my favorite RB sleepers in drafts.
Yeah, I think with the same as you, I think Robinson will be the guy on first and second. It'll be tough to tell, right? With different system, different quarterback. I think a team that wasn't great at running the ball. Robinson is just kind of like a 1 or 2 yards fall forward, 3 or 4 yards for a fall forward, right? Not a massive top end speed or explosion, but he's just built like a tank. He's a powerful dude. I think there will be more opportunities for the running backs with Heineke not playing there. Heineke ran a lot. I like Tyler Heineke. I don't know. He's another guy that I like, and I've always liked. The McLaurin, I think, is the number one. I think Jahan Dotson could really push for that position. We saw him come on last season and be pretty productive with, not great quarterback play. Playing for behind and huge comebacks, which was a great thing for fantasy people, having McLaurin, having Dotson. Even Thomas had some pretty good teams. So this is a hard team. It's a really hard team to predict because of the change, right? They're easier to predict, but the personnel here is slightly different. The coaching and the system is going to be different. So yeah, I think they're bottom of this division again, and a lot of it is going to go with how Sam Howell plays. Quarterback is the most important position in this sport, and it dictates how you call plays, pace of play, depth of targets. All those things are all dictated by the quarterback play. Sam Howell was considered to be a very good quarterback coming out. He slipped down in the draft. Washington ended up with him. We saw him a little bit, like you said, last year, and he was decent. And if you're going that way, then technically an off season, as the starter. They're saying that it's a competition and Brissett's in there, but I think if you're Washington, you want it to be Sam Howell, and you want it to be Sam Howell, the quarterback that you thought you were getting. So.
Yeah, let's get a look at Sam Howell. We do got to get out of here. I think we're both in agreement that the Eagles are going to win this division. The Cowboys will get in there as well. And two good bets, as we mentioned, the path inside the NFC East or even the NFC is pretty good for these two teams. Yeah, water bet, I'm in. Giants under 9.5, you're over 9.5. We'll make that happen. NBA rigged. Terry McLaurin is... What you see is what you get. He's a really good wide receiver. He roughly finishes, low-end wide receiver 2 because of the quarterback play. I don't think that changes, but Dotson's a really decent target as well. 7 touchdowns as a rookie last season, only 61 targets, just was limited to 12 games. I really liked what I saw from him down the stretch of the season. 9 targets, 6, 9, 7, 4, 3 touchdowns in his last 5 games. I think he's a decent little target in around round 9 or so, round 9 or 10 for Jahan Dotson. This team will have to throw the football. They want to run the rock, but they're going to have to throw the football to keep up with some of the teams that are on their schedule. We do appreciate you guys hanging out with us here for the first show. We'll be back on Thursday. We'll continue the team previews. We'll get into sleepers and busts on this show when we get closer to week 1 of the NFL season. And we'll do some live underdog best ball drafts on this show as well. From Eric Young and myself, Chris Meaney. Again, we do appreciate you guys. If you can smash the like button, you have any questions for the next show, leave them there and we'll address them. Appreciate you guys taking the time to hang out. Have a great Tuesday, and we will talk to you guys soon. Cheers.